Well, let's just go back to Lupin for a bit. The stock is cooling off because it had that 5-6% rally yesterday and it's been running anyway over the last couple of months. Ekta, in fact, has been in conversation with Nilesh Gupta, MD of the company. Let's find out some more details on this big approval that's come in for Spiriva.
Yeah, ready? Mr. Gupta, thanks very much for joining us. Well, I wanted to start with the biggest opportunity, or one of the biggest opportunities. Congratulations on the approval for Spiriva generic in the US. Give us the dynamics. How much do you think you can probably make from the drug?
We never talk about this. I think it's a great deal for us. I think it's a great moment for India as well. This is the first DPI for Spiriva. It's the first DPI for us to be approved by the US, but it's also the first DPI to be approved out of India for the US. So I think it's a big deal. From our perspective, it's obviously a large molecule. It's, $1.2 billion or so. It's going to be slow. It's never a very rapid switch with these complex generics. So we hope to launch in the upcoming quarter. Obviously we're the only generic at this point of time. So it's going to be a nice opportunity.
Any foreseeable competition that you see probably in the next 2 to 3 years? Any filers that you might have heard of?
So no filers as of now, as we're told. There likely will be an authorized generic at some point of time, but other than that, we don't see competition at this point of time.
The average assumption is that the price erosion would be around 35 to 40% and market share of around 35 to 40% for Lupin eventually. Is that a fair assumption that we are working with? How aggressive do you think Boehringer Ingelheim will be?
Yeah, you're starting to triangulate your numbers. No, from our perspective, I think we have to see. This is a unique kind of product, right? I think it's a very complex product. There's a lot of regulations that we had to go through and the like, and I think all of that should get reflected, one, in the pricing that we're able to command, but I think also in the market share that we eventually get as well. So I think people will obviously appreciate the fact that there's a true generic, but the offtake will be slower, as we saw in albuterol as well. And then obviously the pricing, we'll see how the dynamics work out.
$140 million is the peak estimate in terms of sales, probably by FY25 odd. Is that a fair assumption?
I heard that number. I don't think that number is unfathomable. We have had generic products even bigger than that, so let's see where that goes.
What does this do to the US sales? Because at one point in time, you did hit $200 million in terms of quarterly sales. Then you came down to around 175 odd. What is the average run rate that we can now expect because of Spiriva generic?
Yeah. So we're at around 180 odd million at this point of time, right? And we'll launch in the next quarter. I think obviously it gets back to north of that 200 million. I think at peak we were over 1.1 billion in the US. So there's a lot of room for us to crawl back before we start growing from the highest level that we achieved. But I think products like this, and I think this gives a lot of confidence for future products, right? So if we can do a DPI, now there's any other DPI that we can do as well. There's a pipeline of over 30 inhalation products in our portfolio itself. So I think there is a lot of room to grow out of this one. Thankfully we've toughed out. We've been saying that, okay, this is the bottom, this is the bottom, this is the bottom, and the bottom kept going lower and lower. I think we saw that in Q4. We're seeing that in Q1 as well. We're back to that 170, 180 million dollar kind of number, and that number is a solid foundation to build on with products like this.
Okay. $850 million in terms of US generic sales by FY25.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair number. That's a pretty fair number. We should be able to do that and maybe some more.
Is US pricing pressure is the worst behind us, because Lupin at one point even exited some drugs?
Yeah, we exited quite a few products, and we were not the only ones. There's a whole bunch of people who exited a bunch of products, primarily around the oral solids. I think the supply continuity seems to be more of a conversation. I think pricing will always be only downwards. So there's all, I think we guide for high single-digit kind of pricing erosion that will remain.
And margins, you have improved in terms of margins. I think it was a 6-7 quarter high. How much more do you think you can do in terms of margins now? Exit run rate was 18% is what you guided for.
Yeah, we would still hope for that. I think certainly we want to get back to that. We're pitifully low. So there's a lot of room to improve. We're actually bottom of the pack, and we're not used to being underperformers. So there's a lot of room for us to grow. I think we already saw that from Q4. You will continue to see this improvement every quarter, and the exit remains, north of 18%.
Okay, Nilesh, quick last question. What is the larger picture for Lupin? Because you have seen some rough times in terms of the US pricing, compliance issues, but now with this approval, with Suprep in your portfolio, albuterol, all of these key, larger complex generic drugs, where do you see the larger picture for Lupin if you're talking, say, 1 to 2 years down the line?
I think the larger picture is clearly the pivot to complex generics, doubling down on India and starting innovation again. And I think that has to be, because all of this is sticky compared to just regular generics in that sense. So I think the pivot from oral solids to complex generics with products like this is happening, but there's a lot more to be done. Injectables, we've not even started. I think you've seen a lot of approvals on injectables, clearly more to be done there. India, obviously we're doubling down. We added 1,000 people. We're going to keep adding and we're going to keep growing in India, and then definitely restart innovation at some point.
Thank you, Nilesh. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, that's the big man at Lupin giving us more details about the big drug approval which the company has got through.